Hello, Florence, my love. I can't believe it's time again this year. 2024 for another birthday book. Can you tell I'm in a new room? It's my sewing room. Let me give you a quick tour. It's pretty big. And actually, I'm working on a project right now. Do you see it on the wall? It's going to be a snowman quilt. It's a pretty nice room. I'm very happy in it. Can't wait to do some projects with you in it. All right, but are you ready for this year's birthday book? It's called The Rise and Fall of Mount Majestic. I love the cover. I see a castle. I see a main character. I see two other little characters down there too. I don't know who any of them are yet, but I'm excited to find out. It's by Jennifer Trafton, and the pictures, because it's got some illustrations along the way. The art is by Brett Hellquist. Are you ready? I am. All right. Ooh, there's a map at the beginning. So I have a feeling we're going to be going to a lot of different places. And we might have to refer to the map as we read. It says Map of the Island by Persimmon Smudge. Persimmon Smudge. That must be, I'm thinking that might be the main character's name. Persimmon. What a cool name. Reminds me of a persimmon. I think that's a kind of fruit. Don't know. Prologue. So it doesn't start with chapter 1. A prologue is before the beginning. There is a very good possibility that you will not believe a word I say. Alas, it is the risk all historians take. The truest things are often the most unbelievable. There is an island in the world, a small but lovely piece of earth, which its inhabitants call, rightly or wrongly, the island at the center of everything. On the day before my story begins, it was as nearly perfect a place as an island in the world could reasonably expect to be. The farmers whistled as they labored in their fields. The fishermen pulled in nets overflowing with fish. The rumble-bumps leaped from rock to rock along the western shore, splashing through tide pools and laughing at the wind. All over the island, people breathed the fresh, crisp breeze wafting in from the sea and let out long, lazy sighs of contentment. And towering above them all was Mount Majestic, that beloved mound of grass and earth and stone. At the very top of the mountain stood the castle, and in a room somewhere the king sat cheerfully eating something. Naturally, there were troubles. Every so often, some unfortunate soul wandered too far into the willow woods and was eaten by a tortoise. The people grumbled about the king. The king grumbled about the people. The rumble-bumps grumbled about no one and were ignored by everyone. The tired workers of the pepper mill trudged their weary circle. The leaf-eaters collected their tears and waited anxiously for justice. The restless mangroves paced the forest floor, searching for a spot to plant their roots and be content. And a young girl with mouse-colored hair and dirty feet hid under a threadbare quilt and dreamed of glory. But despite some rumblings under the surface, the island drifted on the sea as peacefully and complacent as a cloud in the blue sky, until certain events changed it forever. This is the story of those events. I have thoroughly interviewed every eyewitness and triple-checked every detail. If the pages that follow are inspiring, enlightening, or life-changing, I take full responsibility. But if there are any errors in it, it's not my fault. And so I invite you to take off your cloak of doubt, empty your pockets of all suspicions and jests, sit down before the roaring fire of my tale, and believe. Wow. That's the beginning. That's the prologue. I'm hooked already. Chapter 1, in which a flying hat has dire consequences. Dun, dun, dun. On a dark night in a dense forest, while the great wide wonder of the stormy sky threatened to burst through the trees and swallow her up, a girl lost her hat. This would not be an event worth recording in the annals of history, except that the girl not only lost her hat, she lost her head, which is to say she panicked. With a gust of wind, when the gust of wind swept off her hat and sent it flying above the trees, she left the path she had been so carefully following to run after the vanishing blue speck. It is not surprising that when she finally recovered her head and sat down to think, she realized that she had now lost both her hat and her way home. Out of the clumsiest moments of our lives, time can weave the most extraordinary tapestry of events. Who would have guessed that the fate of an entire kingdom depended upon a gust of wind, a flying hat, and a girl losing her way in the forest? Certainly she did not know what was to come. And on that night, she imagined herself to be the most miserable person in the world. The girl's name was Persimmon Smudge, which only added to her misery. She was 10 years old, and 10 whole years of living with that name was already too much. As far as she knew, only one person named Smudge had ever imagined or managed to be heroic, and he had disappeared. Persimmon angrily kicked a stone, which unfortunately for her toe remained in place. "It's all Prunella's fault," she cried. "If she hadn't pestered me about sweeping the floor right in the middle of my glorious dreams about rescuing a baby from the teeth of a murderous alligator, I would never have thrown the broom across the room. Then the broom would never have hit the giving pot, and I wouldn't be here trudging through the willow woods in the middle of the night to fetch a new pot from Theodore, with a storm coming too." She shivered, not so much from the cold as from the thought of her mother returning home in the morning to find the giving pot and the new hat gone, not to mention her daughter. She could just imagine her punishments. No more trips into town, no more afternoons sneaking out to the seashore, nothing but chores. She would end her life as a shriveled old woman surrounded by brooms and darning needles and mixing spoons and rags. Doomed all because of her sister to an everlasting existence of sweeping and dusting and stirring and mending. She could hardly bear the thought. That's why she had run straight for the path to Theodore's cottage in the first place. If it was a choice between braving the woods at night or braving her mother's anger, well, she would take her chances with the woods. Braving the woods at night to save the family from a slow, agonizing death by starvation did have such a heroic sound to it. Well, maybe they wouldn't exactly die of starvation without the giving pot, but they would certainly be very hungry. But then her hat had blown away, and with it all of her heroism. It was a large brimmed hat with embroidered fruit all over it. It looked like a drowning apple tree, more like a drowning apple tree than a hat, but she loved it. Usually she felt invisible, a poor girl with worn-out clothes, a forgettable face, and hair that was neither golden yellow nor chocolate brown nor fiery red, but rather like dirty dishwasher water. People didn't notice her, but they noticed her hat. It made her feel less smudge-like. All at once the sky burst through. White streaks of lightning lit up the blackness that had gathered over the trees. Thunder made the ground tremble. A sudden downpour drenched the willow woods. Persimmon jumped to her feet, holding her arms helplessly above her head. She was so angry and afraid and hungry and wet. So she did the only thing she could do. She started to dance. She leaped and spun and flung out her arms. Her bare feet skipped and slid and squished in the mud. Take that, you thunder! She kicked her heels high. Take that, you storm! She twirled in circles until she was dizzy and out of breath, and her fear had turned into laughing. Then she took one last leap into the wet branches of the nearest willow. She clasped her arms around them and swung upward into the night sky. When she swung back, she bumped into the tree trunk, slid down into the dark, dry space beneath it, and lay there on the ground, panting. As Persimmone would have remembered if she had been thinking clearly, disturbing a willow tree at night is even more foolish than leaving a path to run after a flying hat. High above in the willow's canopy of leaves, two round yellow eyes slowly appeared. A black shape began to creep noiselessly down the trunk. There was a flash of lightning that made the woods suddenly as bright as day, and in that moment, Persimmone saw the tortoise. There had been a time when she was very, very young and only acquainted with the lumbering, clumsy sea turtles that played with her by the shore, when Persimmone had laughed at the idea of being frightened by a tortoise. A poison-tongued, jumping tortoise? Faster than a human? Living in a willow tree? She had thought it was another one of her mother's tricks to keep her out of the woods and at home. Then she had learned better. There was absolutely nothing laughable about a poison-tongued jumping tortoise when you are standing 2 feet away from it. Crouched at the base of the trunk, it was nearly as tall as she was. Its domed shell of black bony plates was rimmed with sharp spikes, and its legs were several times the size of its head. The tortoise's eyes were fixed steadily on her, and from underneath its pointed snout slid a long, snake-like tongue. A tongue so poisonous that a single lick would put a swift end to her. Persimmone saw all of this in a few seconds, and then the night was black again. So I want to show you the illustration. So it looks like she's peeking around. Oops. See her? The tree. And the light from the lightning lit it up. This is the shadow of it. It looks almost like a dog to me. But this is the tortoise's front leg. Remember it said it's big? And the spikes. And then if you look really carefully, there's the tongue. Ooh, snake-like tongue. This sounds scary. I like tortoises, but this is not the kind of tortoise that we typically think of. So I'm thinking this is a fantasy. This was not how it was supposed to happen. She had told the story to herself hundreds of times, laying in her bed with the quilt pulled over her head and imagining that she was the last remaining defender of the town of Candlenut as it was being ravaged by a pack of poisonous-tongued tortoises. The townspeople and her mother and sister, and in some version, the king and his entire court cowered in the background, weeping and crying out, "Persimmone, you are our only hope. Forgive us for thinking you were nothing but a basket maker's daughter, a nobody, a smudge. Forgive us for ignoring you. Save us, Persimmone, save us." And then she would smile sweetly and walk up to the leader of the tortoises and plunge a knife into... But now she was alone, without an admiring audience or victims to be rescued, without a knife or a slingshot or anything to defend herself. Now the woods were dark and rain was pelting the ground like hail, and she was hopelessly lost. And even if she was to put up a valiant fight before she died, no one would ever know, and she would never get a new pot from Theodore or make it home to tell her mother that it was all Punella's fault. "Don't you dare eat me! After all I've been through after all I've been through today, she yelled. The tortoise responded with a hiss as piercing as a scream. Persimmone decided that it was safer to run than to scream back. So she ran through the freezing rain and the darkness, over and under and around what she could not see, except in moments when the lightning lit up the world like a huge candle, only to be blown out by the wind again and again. The ground trembled under the weight of the tortoise as it jumped after her, plowing through the trees on its way. Bump, thud, crash! At last, Persimmone spied a large fallen tree trunk, and she sprinted over it, and ducked into its shadow, pressing against the soft layer of moss that covered it. To her surprise, the moss gave way behind her. She tumbled backwards and suddenly found herself inside the tree. The trunk was hollow like a tunnel, and the moss had been covering a small hole in the side. It was a perfect hiding place. If only the tortoise had not seen her, but it had. Its shell scraped against the bark as it scrambled over the tree trunk. Persimmone squeezed further back inside the dark tunnel, just as the tortoise thrust its head straight into the hole and began to come in after her. It was lucky for Persimmone that the shell of the poison-tongued jumping tortoise was so much larger than its brain, and also larger than the hole in the tree trunk. Just as the snapping jaws and outstretched tongue had almost reached her face, the tortoise's shell got stuck and wouldn't move forward another inch. Hissing in fury, the tortoise kicked and rolled and stretched its neck as far as it could, but Persimmone was beyond its reach. It finally withdrew in disappointment, but it did not leave. Instead, it sat down right outside the hole, blocking Persimone's exit. "Oh, I should never have gotten out of bed this morning," said Persimmone, forgetting that to be alive and uneaten was a miracle worthy of notice. She waited and waited in the pitch-black tunnel until the sound of the pouring rain was drowned out by the harsh rattle of the tortoise's snoring. At last, she lay down inside the cramped space and fell asleep, too tired even to pout over her misfortune, too tired, in fact, to hear the faint shudder of sigh behind her in the dark recesses of the tree trunk. A broom, a hat, a girl, a hole. Small things in a big world. But without the small things, there would be no story to tell. And most importantly, I would not still be alive to tell it. Wow. That was a good chapter. I'm thinking we're going to like this one. So when I stumble when I read, because I'm reading aloud. Usually when I try to read aloud to kids, with students, I should say, I always read it ahead of time so I can be more fluent. But with you, I want to kind of be surprised with you. So sometimes I stumble on some phrases and you hear me go back and fix myself because it's just who I am. I like to read it the right way, for you especially. So forgive my stumbles. And I think, as I said, we're going to love it. So that was the prologue and chapter 1. I can't wait for tomorrow's chapters. Or the next chapters. I don't know when you're going to be watching these. You never know. But anyway, I love you. And I want you to send my love to the whole family. Kisses to you. Kisses to Louis. Kisses to everybody. And until we read again, have a great day.